cousin of mine recently, I had a chat with her, and she said, I think it's wrong that in our society, the traits and characteristics that are generally perceived to be masculine, such as ambition, discipline, perseverance, um, ability to deal with stress, complexity, willing to sacrifice your other parts of your life, let's say social life, hobbies, etc., to advance your career, that those traits are the ones that enable one to rise up in dominance hierarchies, especially professionally. Um, she said she thinks it's wrong. She doesn't have an answer to what is a better way to run society and organizations, but we should all think about what would be the better way. Now, let me approach this from another angle. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that abilities such as speed, explosiveness, and power are seen as traditionally masculine traits. But these traits enable an individual to excel in pretty much all sports. And you say, well, that's just wrong because those are generally perceived to be masculine traits. And while that's wrong, I don't have an answer what we should do about it to enable the traditionally feminine traits to also be successful in sports. Now, when presented that way, you see the problem and the dilemma is if you have rules in sports, then clearly, without exception, it's speed, power, explosiveness, and obviously, let's not forget technique. Those play the basically the difference between somebody who is going to win and somebody who's going to lose. Now, the fact that just males happen to have more explosiveness, power, endurance, and probably also hand-eye coordination. Uh, so if you put women against men in any sports, by default, men are going to win. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's a completely different issue. When it comes to the original point of when we have a free country, which is based on meritocracy, essentially meaning that those with the best abilities, skills, and hardest work or smartest work, those are the ones who are going to rise up in dominance hierarchies. That's what we've been doing for centuries and millennia. So that's a formula that's been proven successful. When you say that's wrong, okay, fair enough. Well, how about you present an alternative? Maybe we should have people promoted based on their emotional intelligence, based on their kindness, based on whatever characteristics that you deem to be superior to the existing ones. What's going to happen then when you've got feminine qualities that are prioritized over merit? You're going to have organizations and societies that are going to crumble in the face of those societies and organizations that are basing their advancement in merit. It's the same thing as when you have, for example, for firemen, police officers, and military, you're reducing the qualification, the requirements to serve there, let's say for women. Um, show me a military that's ever been able to perform, well, let's say a military that is feminized, or you put the women in the front lines. How does that military do against some other military that is composed exclusively of males? I mean, we all know the results are not going to be great. If you have a fire and you've got female fire people, female fire women that are trying to run into a building on fire and rescue people, and they have to carry, grown men out of there. we all understand that it's not going to be going down that well. So while there are these components that are purely physical, and we all understand that those traits are different between men and women on the average, of course, somebody can say, well, I know a woman who's 6 foot tall and weighs 200 pounds, that's strong like a bull, and she's stronger than 90% of men. Yes, but that's the exception. Show me the strongest man and the strongest woman on the planet. Guess who's going to be stronger? So that's one issue, but then you've got the non-physical side of it, which is meritocracy. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. It's the feminists say that it's wrong that it's all men running the big businesses and men running government, etc., men winning Nobel Prizes. Well, here again, if you look at the bell curve of the IQ distribution, for example, the smartest people on the IQ distribution is wider for men. So the smartest people are overwhelmingly men, and the dumbest people are also men. So trying to force women into the top positions in society through quotas or affirmative action or whatever policies you have in place, that is essentially stupid. Because what you want to have is you want to have on top of any dominance hierarchy the most competent people. Doesn't matter what their gender is, what their race, religion, creed, belief system is, you want to have the most competent people on the top. But if you're force feeding the some ideology that disables the most competent people reaching the top, then you're not going to have the most competent organizations. That simple. But just accepting the fact that this is widely researched in psychology, that the IQ distribution is wider for men. So essentially the top talent, the most intelligent, the billionaires, the top managers, etc., those are overwhelmingly men. And that's just natural. But also, more than 90% of the prison population, those are men. Out of homeless people, way over 90% are men. But it seems as though when that's a male problem, people are like, well, men, man up, take care of yourself. So I think there's a problem in that sense, that there's just this like, oh, let's look at the top people. And if those are overwhelmingly in the West, those are, let's say, white men, then we have a problem. It's the same thing as when you look at sports leagues like the NBA. Blacks represent about 13% of the US population, but they represent, what, 3/4 of the NBA players? So, yeah, we kind of see that there's a mismatch between the amount of blacks in the US and blacks in NBA. So they have some sort of an advantage physically because they're just more skilled in basketball. And that's why they reach the highest levels of said sports. Now, if we would reverse engineer the logic that's been pushed upon us lately. Somebody might say, well, maybe the NBA is run by blacks and they're racist against other ethnic groups, so they only pick blacks into the NBA. But that would sound ridiculous, right? Because NBA, like NFL or whatever sports leagues, those are meritocratic. So the best people rise to the top, regardless of other attributes like race or religion or whatever. So why is it that we allow meritocracy unhinged completely and uncontrolled in sports? So you just have the best guys at the top and the best girls at the top of their respective sports. But then when it comes to, let's say, academia or management teams or board memberships in large companies, why do you want to force feed women, or you want to have affirmative action? Let me give you an example. Let's say you've got a brain tumor and you need to go into an operation, and they assign you a brain surgeon to do the operation. And obviously there's risks. You could die, you could be disabled, something could just go horribly wrong. Brain surgery is not very easy. Would you want to have the best brain surgeon available, regardless of their other attributes. You just want to have the most skilled brain surgeon to operate you in order to have a successful surgery, right? Or would you want to have a trans, black, lesbian, Muslim brain surgeon who got into medical school because of affirmative action and for having scored highest on the victimhood Olympics, and then they got into specialty into brain surgery because of scoring those points in the oppressed um, hierarchical system. So that's really the question. Or let's say you're going into a plane to fly intercontinental. Do you want to have a pilot that's selected not because of their skills and their capacity as a pilot, or do you want to have some sort of score high on the minority card, and so you want to have, for example, I don't know, a disabled dwarf that comes from Pakistan who's trans as a pilot? Would you feel safer than you just have the pilot that's the most skilled and qualified possible? So if we start to put these artificial limits in our meritocratic system, what's going to happen is these systems are going to be less competitive, and the more you do it, the more likely it is that they're going to crumble if you just give it a bit of time. We have great examples globally of non-meritocratic systems. I mean, look at, for example, the Kremlin in Russia. These guys who are sitting at the top of both government and business in Russia, they're not selected there based on their merits, but they're selected there based on their loyalty, right? You got, St. Petersburg thugs that just happen to be Putin's friends, but because of their loyalty, now they're sitting on the top echelons of both government and business, and they're running oil companies and power companies, etc. I mean, look at the system. How corrupt is it? How inefficient it is? And it's the same thing with all autocratic countries, is that you select the people at the top based on their loyalty rather than merit. Because everybody knows in business and also in politics, um, you know, as a manager, you would rather want to have loyal people underneath you who are not going to take your job than have competent people with questionable loyalties, right? Because then they might just kick you off your stool, right? So this was an interesting discussion I had with this cousin of mine, and the good thing is she's open-minded. So when I was trying to explain my point, she was like, "Okay, I get that." Unfortunately, I think we have insufficient amounts of adults in the room, in the public sphere, in the West talking about these issues. And it's become an echo chamber where you've got on the one side, you've got the facts and the research that we should be focusing on. And the other side, we've got ideology. And if these two clash, then the other half of the population, they just want to shut down the facts, saying, well, those must be based on oppressive patriarchy, racism, fascism, whatever. But you can't just talk about the reality of the world, because the reality doesn't reflect kindly on your ideology. So you could say that's somewhat equivalent to an ideology like communism, is if the reality doesn't reflect the ideology of communism, you have to choose one of the two. If you choose the reality, you basically have to abandon communism. But if you stick to communism, you have to abandon reality and just put lies on top of it. And eventually it's going to crumble. So that's my few thoughts on this issue. See you next time.